see how me and you connected. I'm so grateful. May your breadbasket never be empty, brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you so very much, sir. Thanks a lot. 7 years ago tonight, Dr. King gave, I dare say, his greatest sermon ever. Some will say speech. Keith Miller wrote a book. It's called Martin Luther King's Biblical Epic, his final great speech. I did an interview with him when I was at TV One. I like to air this interview every single year because I have a problem. White folks gonna do what they do. And Keith is white, so I ain't talking about him. I have a problem when we as black people, when we talk about Dr. King, and we talk about that sermon, all we ever focus on is the bottom 2 minutes of that sermon. When he talks about, I've been to the mountaintop, I've been to the promised land, that drives me absolutely crazy. It bothers me when we don't understand that that was a 43-minute, 16-second epic speech where he talked about black economics. He talked about how we are to operate. And so I wanted to play this because, again, this night is when it happened. And I wanted to share this with you and for you to understand it. And so here's that interview. Many of you have heard the last part of Dr. King's final speech, I've been to the mountaintop, but most folks don't understand that it is a 46-minute speech that is phenomenal. We spoke with Keith Miller, author of Martin Luther King's Biblical Epic, his final great speech, about it and how important it was.
I call this speech a famous speech, but also an unknown speech. It's famous because the last 2 minutes are famous, especially when he talks about going up to the top of the mountain and looking out to see the promised land, but I may not get there with you. But we as a people will get to the promised land. That part is famous, and people think that he's predicting his assassination the next day. But the rest of the speech is overlooked. But in order to understand the conclusion, you need to understand the entire speech, because if he only wanted to speak for 2 minutes, he would have spoken for 2 minutes. So he spoke for 46 minutes, so he spoke for 46 minutes. The conclusion concludes something. So in order to understand the conclusion, you have to understand the whole speech.
Well, it's the same thing I say every year when it comes to I Have a Dream speech. That was never even in the original written version. And again, as we focus on that as opposed to looking at the entire thing, always from a black church standpoint, I say we focus on the hoop part. That's the hoop part, but you better understand the thesis in the scripture earlier in the speech.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Earlier in the speech. So one of the things that you lay out, the architecture of the church played a role in this. What do you mean by that?
I think the architecture of the church is very important, and it's been misrepresented by historians. They call it, quote, cavernous. It's not cavernous at all. It's an architectural jewel, and it's beautifully and brilliantly designed.
Mason Temple.
Mason Temple in Memphis. It seats 3,734 people. I know because I counted the seats. So, but somehow the architect was so brilliant that he could get these seats close to the pulpit. So if there hadn't been 3,000 people able to come to this speech, King would not have given the speech at all, because this was the largest venue in the entire South that African Americans controlled. And King was exhausted. He was in his motel room that night. He didn't want to give the speech. And he gave the speech because Ralph Abernathy told him, there's 3,000 people here. We need to, you need to come down here, Martin. If he had been anywhere else, there wouldn't have been that many people there, because there was a giant thunderstorm that night that kept a lot of people away.
You say that King made it clear that the oppressed must focus on the Bible and, as you say, lift themselves above the persistent exploitation that they dog.
Speech offers King's interpretation of the Bible, and it's very important to understand that. He does something of a tour of the Bible in the speech. He starts out with the Exodus. He quotes Jeremiah. He quotes Isaiah. He quotes Amos. He has a long passage in the speech where he's talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And his professors in seminary taught him that the Bible was an ancient document. It's ancient history. It's ancient literature. You need to be an expert on the ancient past in order to understand it. And his Old Testament professor was an archaeologist. But King says, no, anybody can understand the Bible because we are living in the Bible. And what's going on in Memphis is a new chapter in the Exodus. The Exodus is a story that keeps going on. For him, the Bible is only incidentally a book. The Bible is an ongoing narrative. The Exodus is still going on. The civil rights movement is a new chapter in the Exodus. And he has a similar interpretation of the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Keith, what do you think? What do you make of the part of the speech where he says if God were to ask him what time period would he like to live in, he would pick the second half of the 20th century? Why do you think he would pick that?
That's important because before King got to Memphis, the national press was paying zero attention to Memphis and the garbage workers strike. The garbage workers are all...
They were ignoring him, too.
Sure. And they were ignoring him, too, right. They were trying to write him off. So when he gets there, he takes this Memphis strike, which the press is ignoring, and he's saying, he's lining it up with these great events in history. I want to go back in time. I want to go back to the Exodus. I want to go back to the Emancipation Proclamation. And he's lining up the strike in Memphis with these great events in history. He's saying this is so important, as opposed to the news media not even paying attention to Memphis. So he's redesigning the strike.
This has got to be, one of the speeches that I probably paid most attention to over the course of my career. I saw it as a roadmap. I saw it as, King's way of lining out what justice really looked like. He says in this speech, let the issues remain where they are. The issue is justice. And he lines out that it is economic freedom, that it is political freedom, that it is a whole host of things. And so I guess I ask you, if you were talking to the young people of Ferguson today, if you were talking to the young people who fill the streets in New York or D.C., what salient point do you think they ought to take from this particular writing?
King focuses on justice, and that's the reason to focus on the Exodus, because the Exodus is a story of escaping from oppression and escaping from slavery. What King is, to me, what he's saying about the present is, you are important, your issue is important, oppression can still be going on, we may need another Exodus, and you may live in some tiny town, you may live in a small neighborhood in a giant city, you may think that you're not important, but these ordinary people, these strikers in Memphis, who most of them dropped out of high school, they are important players in an important drama. So he's saying that people who think they might be ordinary are capable of extraordinary deeds. And that's what fueled the civil rights movement, the masses of people who look like ordinary people who are making extraordinary sacrifices and creating extraordinary accomplishments.
The book is an amazing book. It is Martin Luther King's biblical epic, his final great speech by Keith D. Miller. Folks certainly read the book, but definitely you want to hear the speech. I'm glad you broke it down, Keith, because a lot of people literally only that last part, but they totally ignore the other 45 minutes, if you will.
Right.
And it is an absolutely phenomenal speech there. We appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, sir.
Nola, Greg. Nola, I'll start with you again. It drives me crazy when we only talk about those 2 minutes. And it really was something that, King literally was leaving us a blueprint, a black print, if you will.
Absolutely. And it aligns, wow, I'm trying to connect all these dots. It just aligns so perfectly coming off the heels of Cory Booker's speech. And I feel uniquely blessed to be one of those people, who was present and who had a chance to talk to him after he finished. After 25 hours, he still had the humility and the grace to be funny and to share his time, and truly he invoked the oratory, that long history of the orator, and how that is activism in and of itself, right? And for me, in as much as he spoke about John Lewis and he called us to action to get into some good trouble, my divinity school self kept hearing echoes of Dr. King, right? In this beautiful traditional Black oratory way of saying, this is the problem, this is what we are, and this is how we need to come together to solve it. And so right now, as we're talking about Dr. King, as we are thinking about where our country is right now, as I'm thinking about the march on April 5th, I'm personally not going to be there, but I'm going to be involved media-wise. All of these things are coming together, and I absolutely agree with Dr. King thinking that, you know, Exodus is a continual story. I mean, if you just look at the story and the legacy of black people, you know, the struggle and the oppression, it doesn't just go away because we get a civil rights package. It's ongoing, and we have to continue to fight for it, right? So I'm just, my emotions are all over the place tonight because of what 57 years represent, what that speech represents beyond the 2 minutes, what Cory Booker just did, the call to action to get into good trouble. And, you know, the one thing that I will say, I was invited to give a speech for AFGE, and I used an example from Boondocks to kind of get the speech going. And I said there was an episode where Granddad was outed because he used to lie and tell everybody that he was far more involved with Dr. King being assassinated than he actually was, that he was so involved in the civil rights movement, and come to find out he wasn't. So my call to action was for us to really dig deep and ask ourselves, who will you be in this moment? Who will you be? And that's where we are right now. Dr. King's words still speak to us 57 years later because we are still in the same fight. So who will you be in this moment? Will you be a couch potato, and will you tweet about it, and will you roll up in Roland's comments? Or will you do something? Will you get into good trouble? I could go on, but I'll leave it there.
Greg?
I echo everything you said, Nola. It's wonderful that you were there. That was an electric moment. And maybe we'll look back and say that was a pivotal moment and a shift that had to take place in this country. And Roland, it was good to see that interview. And as you remind us then, as you remind us now, to go over that full 43 minutes. I played the first 10 minutes or so for my students this morning, none of whom had ever heard, though even anything other than, as you say, that last back end, that 2 or 3 minutes at the end. And, you know, listening to Dr. King, as he said, who didn't feel well, who came out in the storm, and all those people were there, to hear him open that speech by thanking his friend, Ralph Abernathy, and to say it's always good to have somebody who is your close friend and associate say something good about you. And then he said, and Ralph Abernathy is the best friend that I've ever had in the world. You know, just imagining what Abernathy, that cross he bore after King was assassinated the next day. I asked the students what they thought, and we started talking about it. And, you know, King, I understand the biblical angle, and it's very important, but King really gives a history of, he gives a human history. And as we know in that first part, he said, you know, God, if he asked me where, God, if God asked me, and he doesn't gender God in the beginning. He said, if God Almighty asks me, and he goes all the way back, goes to Egypt, and unfortunately he does what too many black people do, Jeremiah Wright being an exception, which is misread Egyptian history, but I understand because that's how we were socialized. But the metaphor holds up. He comes through Greece and he comes forward, and he said, as Lauren asked him there, he says, just let me live a little while in that second half of the 20th century. And then he starts talking about, he criticizes America. You know, King, it was almost a year to the day. The next day, it was 1 year to the day. The day he was assassinated, 1 year to the day after he had given that why I opposed the war in Vietnam speech. And he's already there in the Mason Temple speech. He's talking about the United States being sick. And when he puts this thing, he says something is happening in the world. It ain't just Memphis. And then he talks about Nairobi, Kenya, and Ghana, Johannesburg, South Africa. And then he talks Atlanta. He's giving this really a Pan-African view of the world. This is Martin King. And you know, I asked the students what they thought about that, and they kept coming back to this idea that this is a Christian preacher who has transcended Christianity. And that led me to show them a little clip from Howard Thurman, the teacher of Martin Luther King, and then Benjamin Mays, the teacher of Martin Luther King. Because when King gives that speech, it's almost like a valedictory in his life. You know, and people talk about that last part. So he saw it coming. Of course, he saw it coming. He was living with death every day. But in that last speech, he gives a survey of his life, really in history. And then finally, I asked the students if they were familiar with Malcolm X's Ballot of the Bullet speech. They said, we've heard the name. I said, did you know that he gave that speech twice? Once was April the 12th, 1964 in Detroit. That's the one that the Henry brothers recorded. Milton Henry and his brother Richard Henry. Baba Amari Obadeli, whose very good friend Chokwe Lumumba was out of Detroit, whose son, Chokwe Antar, is fighting for his life to be the mayor again, political life, being the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. And I said, but the first time that Malcolm gave that speech was April the 3rd, 1964. 4 years to the day from when Dr. King gave that speech we just heard part of. And I said, that's important for this reason. In the Ballot or the Bullet speech, Malcolm X says we need to put our political differences aside. We need to come together. Whatever we disagree on is fine, but right now we need to be together. King and Malcolm were of one accord, and these people are going to stop writing these history books. I don't care if you ban them in Florida, South Carolina, anywhere else. Until we tell our history, they will have us at each other's throats. And these two men represented the best of what it meant to be black, and they did that in a spirit of unity. So thank you, brother, for reminding us about this. And I'd encourage everybody to go and listen to those 43 minutes after we get off the air.
Indeed, indeed. And that's, again, why these platforms are so important, because, trust me, ain't no mainstream network talking about that sermon tonight. I can guarantee you that. But thank you so very much. I appreciate both of you being with us. Robert had to sign off, so thank you very much to Robert, to Greg, as well as Nola. Thanks a lot. Folks, tomorrow is April 4th, of course, the day that Dr. King was assassinated. And in Memphis, it's going to be a virtual event taking place. John Hope Bryant is having an event. It's a virtual event, having a number of different speakers. Give me 1 second. I had all of this on one iPad. That iPad died, so let me shift everything over to the next one. So you can register for this virtual event. We're going to be streaming it on the Black Start Network, so you can watch it here as well. And the focus is economics. One of the things that I've always said is I believe that we make a mistake when we talk about Dr. King's, when we commemorate the day that he was assassinated, that people only just talk about that event, but they don't talk about why he was in Memphis. They don't talk about the economic piece of what he was involved in. So I think that is critically important. So this virtual event taking place tomorrow, April 4th, begins at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 Central. It's called Dream Forward. Here are some of the speakers who are going to be speaking at that event as well. Here's more of the speakers. Again, I will be watching it. We'll be streaming it. And so if you want to register, you should go to, give me 1 second, I just had it. Go to midsouthstreaming.com, midsouthstreaming.com. Folks, also don't forget April 11th, we're going to be in Raleigh, North Carolina for our town hall regarding St. Augustine's University. There are issues happening there. A lot of people are calling for change, saying that the board needs to be changed out, especially the board chair. They've had significant financial issues. We will be broadcasting live from Martin Street Baptist Church at the Fellowship Hall. Doors open at 5 p.m. And so we look forward to you being there as well. And so we're going to be on the road there. So we look forward to that. Folks, the stuff that we do, these sort of events that we cover, no one else is doing these things. And so your support is critical to us being able to do these things. And so if you want to contribute to our Bring the Funk fan club, as I said, our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing on average $50 each a year to raise $1 million through our fan base. There are multiple ways for you to give. Cash App is one of those. This is click the Cash App button. We don't charge a fee. This is not Substack, Patreon. We don't charge you a monthly fee. This is, frankly, a love offering. That's really what it boils down to. And so what you should do is go to, go to Stripe. This is the QR code here. This is to contribute via Cash App, because Cash App closed out our accounts when they changed their rules, and so you can't give to us direct, but you can use Stripe to do so. You can also use Stripe for credit cards. If you want to send a check and money order, please make it out to Roland Martin Unfiltered, not Roland Martin, not Black Star Network, not Unfiltered. It has to be Roland Martin Unfiltered for the purpose of our banks. Some of you have sent me emails. Please understand, when you send checks, they're coming to us in D.C. I have to open them, I have to sort them, sign them, and then send them to our bank. They have a whole different process, so it takes some time for us to cash the checks. Obviously, if you give electronically, it's a lot faster, but there's a process involved, and so it might. And I don't go to the post office every single day, and so I go once every 2 to 3 weeks. And so understand, it takes about a month for us to process checks and money orders. It was different when we were getting 30 or 40, but in the last 2 times I've gone to the post office, we've had more than 730 checks and money orders, so it takes a little time, folks. The P.O. Box is 57196, Washington, D.C., 2003 7-0196. PayPal, R. Martin Unfiltered, Venmo, RM Unfiltered, Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Download the Black Star Network app, Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. Be sure to, of course, download, first of all, get our Black Star Network gear, our Roland Martin Unfiltered gear. Get the swag, our shirts, hoodies, wall art, mugs, t-shirts, you name it. RolandMartin.creator-spring.com, RolandMartin.creator-spring.com, or go to BlackStarNetwork.com. QR code is there on the screen as well. Also, get my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. Available. Bookstores nationwide. I'll have them on site. We're in North Carolina next week as well. I'll be personally autographing them there as well. Download the version I read on Audible, and be sure to download the app Fanbase. You can also invest. $11 million has been hit. Now it's $11.1 million. So go to startengine.com/Fanbase. Folks, I want to play for you the full video that Gramps Morgan song to close the show out. We're going to do that right now. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
If you give a little more than you take, and if you try to fix more than you break, if you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain, there's a place for people like you. If you stand up for those down on their knees and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, if you shine a little light, give sight to the ones who've lost their way, there's a place for people like you. I've heard up there the streets are made of gold, and when you get there, there's a hand to hold. I believe when your days down here are through, there's a place up there for people like you. If you walk around with your heart on your sleeve, and if you're trying to be the change you want to see, if you lay down There's a place